Now, I said a minute ago, you're basically an American. You were brought up in America. Uh, how is it for an American to spend 26 years in Europe? I mean, do you lose contact with your country? Do you become more European? Do you see things differently?
One sees things differently, certainly. I keep contact naturally with my family and my friends. I make a great effort to. My friends are very important to me, and uh, I go often to the United States, and I'm very eager to, to keep up with what goes on there. And I think it's fairly easy for most Europeans to do. I don't think Americans keep up with what's happening in Europe very much. When I'm in America, it's very hard to find any news about what's happening in Europe. But of course, once my children were born here, I began to feel at home, and this is where my family is now. And so in many ways I feel European, but certainly my education is American, and I'm still very much American.
What do you see as the basic differences between the way Europeans see things and Americans see things? Do you see a difference?
Well, of course, yes, there is a difference, but it would be hard to describe, I think, because the world is changing so much and so rapidly, and what would have been true of a European way of thinking 10 or 20 years ago certainly isn't true today. I don't know, it would depend on which subject and which
well,
as
a way of life, the European way of life is different than the American way of life.
Well, that's different in Northern Europe than in Southern Europe. We perhaps have more in common here with other Mediterranean countries than we would with some of the Northern European countries. And the Mediterranean countries seem to hold on to older traditions longer, and don't accept change very easily.
Don't you think also that there are different views of the values of, for example, time and
oh, certainly,
and the relationship with nature? And
well, I think people here, particularly in Monaco and on the coast here, live each day as it comes a little bit more, and are not quite in such a hurry and such a rush.
Was it difficult for you I mean, you'd had a very public life in America in the motion picture industry. Of course, you've had a public life here, but it's a totally different life.
Very different. When I was acting, of course, I loved acting. I loved working in the theater and pictures. I didn't particularly like being a movie star, if you know what I mean. There's a big difference. I loved working at my craft. I didn't like having to have a public, the public appearance of being a movie star. Although even in Hollywood, my private life was pretty much my own. When I married, my private life became public, and I really had no privacy at all, and that was an adjustment to make.
Have you resented the invasion of your private life? Do you feel the press has been unfair about it?
Well, in certain instances, yes, definitely. Although, as far as my husband and I are concerned, we are public figures, and we have to expect that. Where my children are concerned, they resent it very much, and they don't feel they are public figures and that they don't have to be at their age. And particularly their growing up years have been made very, very difficult because of the press and the so-called paparazzi who follow them relentlessly. And it's not always their fault. They're just trying to make a living the best way they can. But it's the editors who encourage them to do this and buy the pictures. And this has been very, very difficult and has caused a great deal of anguish to me and to my children. And they make up things. They've made up romances. They love to say my children have flunked out of school when they haven't. In fact, they've all been very good students. They love to say, well, if you believe some of the things, I would have had at least 52 babies by now. For many years, I was always expecting a baby, according to the press, or that my husband and I are constantly being divorced, which also is not the case. But my children have had to. Stephanie, for 2 years, went to gymnastic class in the trunk of the automobile, just so that they wouldn't follow her, wouldn't see her. And then, and there've been instances where Carolyn used to come home in tears from a tennis lesson. She said, well, I couldn't have the lesson because the photographers were there and I didn't want to take it with them, taking pictures, and it was just this continual, and they have felt, particularly Carolyn has felt very much, I suppose, like a hunted animal, with the hounds after her, and it's, they really go in for the kill sometimes, and it's unfortunate. I've always felt that I'm always willing to give the other fellow the benefit of the doubt, and I certainly respect people who have a job to do, but when it comes to some papers kind of feel that we're fictitious characters and that gives them the right to make up any kind of story they want. And this is, one is helpless in defense of that. And if a child is very young, I find it very, outrageous, really, that when Stephanie was 16, they've had her engaged to someone she never even set eyes on. Not engaged, but I mean, saying sneaking out to sea, or being, putting innuendos there that made it sound something very disagreeable. And that's been hard for them. Growing up in the spotlight is not easy, and it's been tough. I'll throw it to you. I don't think any mother can really see the future. I think with all my children, I hope that they'll be able to bring out their qualities as individuals.
You've been talking about the children, which leads me to another question, and that is, you were brought up in America. You were brought up in Philadelphia in an Irish Catholic family, and now you've brought up 3 children in a totally different atmosphere here in Europe. What would you say, first of all, are the basic differences between the way you yourself were brought up and the way you brought up your own children?
Well, I think I've tried to instill a lot of my own upbringing into to their life, because we only know from our own experience, and I've tried to adapt what I thought would be useful to them. I think I've tried to expose them to as many things as possible, to teach them as many skills as possible, to expose them to as many points of view as possible. We've often had them with us, with our friends, they haven't been, I find that with a lot of my American friends, the children are sort of pushed off to be with the children. We've always tried to include the children with us and our friends and have all ages together, which I think is more beneficial and more fun for everyone. Maybe our children don't always think it that way, but I think on the whole they're very fond of our friends, and they've learned a lot from being around older people. Also here in Monte Carlo, we have at certain times of year, it's a very international meeting point, and we've had perhaps around our table as many nationalities as guests often, and so our children have been exposed to a lot. Naturally, being in Europe, the emphasis on languages is more important. Our children all speak English and French perfectly. 2 of them speak German, 2 Spanish, and 2 of them Italian. So that, this, I think, is an important part of their culture. Also, what can I say, the difference? Well, there have been so many differences in American education since I was educated there too. I mean, so it's hard to compare. The changes in American schools from what it was 20 years ago as now is very different. And even here in Europe, I noticed there's a big difference from the time that Caroline was in school as to her sister Stephanie, and there's 8 years difference. So, as mothers and educators, we have to adapt and change all the time.